Welcome back, everyone, to Inside the Diamonds podcast. I'm your host, JC, and I'm joined again tonight with CJ. Hey, CJ, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, ready to talk about everything that's going on right now.
Yeah, it sucks that the trade deadline is tomorrow at 4. I don't believe I could. I don't think we both could pull out a PTO day and call it quits and just cover baseball live stream all day. As fun as it would be, but you know what would happen? We'd end up doing it, and not a single move would be made.
That and the deadline's actually 6 this year.
Is it 6?
Yeah, it's
I
at six
always remember
o'clock.
it being 4 o'clock, so that's interesting. I'll be very interested to see what happens. As you said, there's a lot going on, not just trade deadline mentioned, but there's also some injuries, some extensions, some shifts that will happen in the standings. But to kick it off tonight and dive right in, why don't we talk about one of the league division leaders, the Milwaukee Brewers, and their key injury that they just suffered with Christian Yelich and what
Well,
that means for them.
we got breaking news.
Well, of course we do.
Expect this the whole episode.
Yep.
Ahmed Rosario is heading to the Dodgers.
Really?
hmm
Didn't we talk about that
hmm
early on in the year? I thought so.
hmm
And I talked about Isaac Paredes going to the Cubs, and that happened 4 months way too late. But interesting. Who's he going for? Does it
Doesn't
say
say right
yet?
now. I'm waiting for it to come in.
So what did okay, so interesting. This is not what we had talked about or not on the agenda. Um how does this make you think in regards to the overall health of Betts and that infield?
It's got to be a lot of questions. Like, I mean, does it open the door for somebody like Kike Hernandez to get moved? A
Mm,
utility guy where in the aspect of maybe they acquire a prospect for Kike, not a top tier prospect, obviously, but I mean, it opens the door for guys like him, Chris Taylor. They might get moved. I mean, they just keep stocking up on infielders who move all over the place, like we talked about earlier. When we'll get to it in a little while, about like Mookie Betts. He's the shortstop when he's healthy. He can play second. He can play outfield. So they got Rosario. So does he move back to the outfield? Is he going to play second? What about Gavin Lux?
what about yeah, well, so let's table that because now everything well, screw it. We'll table it for now, but it just opens up those doors that I want to talk more about Mookie when we get back to the Dodgers. So, as CJ mentioned, probably going to be, hopefully, there'll be, within this hour that we're on, we'll hear some more news, some different trades coming in. But back to the Brewers, who we both
Yeah,
were thinking that they were on the verge of most likely going to lose that division just because of how the Cardinals had been playing and also, the steam that the Pirates were getting. But Christian Yelich going down with an injury, they're 2-2 without him. 17-14.
I think that's
I can't
outscored. I think they got
outscored
outscored
17-14,
14.
and they just really not good without him. He doesn't have the power numbers that he did a few years ago, but he's that constant contact hitter now, hitting it to the gaps, driving, hitting for average, and he was stealing some bases. That's a huge gap, especially with Bryce Terang not hitting the way he was. Jackson Cheerio hasn't been playing up to where he was supposed to. Everyone thought he was going to be. So, what's your opinion on the Brewers now and what's left for them? Are they a team that targets Brent Rooker?
I think they got to be in the conversation for somebody in the outfield because Yelich, it sounds like, is going to avoid surgery. He's going to go with the rehab route. And so who knows how long that relatively is, and who knows if
Yeah.
it doesn't lead to surgery. Um, the issue now is, like we've talked about in recent weeks, is them losing the Central League. And
Yep.
I think the Cardinals going 4-6 in their last 10 has helped them. Whereas the Pirates at 6-4, if they can go get somebody, for an outfield that, like, if they get Rooker and steal him, then the door is still open. But right now it's still the Brewers, and realistically, the stretch they have coming is where I have my questions of what happens next. And I sent it to you earlier. Right now, they have a 6 game lead in the division.
Yep.
You're going to face the Braves, the Nationals, the Braves, the Reds, the Dodgers, and the Guardians. Realistically, that's 3, maybe 4 series they may not win.
Yeah.
I mean, they should win the Nationals and they should win the Red Series. But you drop, really, if you think about it, you come out of those first two Braves series, 'cause it's Braves, Nationals, Braves. You come out of that after
Hmm.
the trade line, and you relatively should know where they're sitting if this could be an issue where they're losing the division lead or if they're keeping it. Now, as I've thought about it more and more, if they do lose the division lead, I think they still might make the playoffs and be a wild
Yeah,
card.
there's a lot. I mean, with 60 wins right now, that's quite. They would have to fall drastically. I mean, they're 6-4 in their last 10 games. The Cardinals are 4-6, and the Pirates are 6-4. That's a
Hmm.
lot of ground. Can it be done? Yes, but that's a huge gap because they. I mean, it's not the first time he's been injured this year. It's just the timing this time around that makes it a little bit more interesting. You see the Cardinals adding pieces. Pittsburgh's playing well. It's just I mentioned this today in an article, or I didn't mention it. I was thinking about today in an article I wrote in just a roster of moves for the Reds. They've dealt with a bunch of injuries, and so have a lot of other teams. But I think about the Braves. We've talked about it. They get hit with like big key players. They're top players. Acuna, Albies, Strider. You take those
Lopez,
three studs, Lopez. You
thankfully, he's
take
good.
three. Yeah, but if you were to take three of the top players, your ace, on paper, your ace, your star outfielder, and a star infielder, who's surviving that,
Not many people.
right? So it'll be interesting to see what the Brewers do. Now, another piece of news before there's two other things we need to talk about before we get to the standings and get to the trades. You and I have had several conversations about Alex Cora being the next manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers. Well, the other day he signs a 3-year extension, correct?
Yep,
Right? Signs a 3-year
for
extension.
21.75 mil, I believe.
Yeah. And I think it's well worth it. I think what he has done with his staff collectively, we've talked plenty about Bailey. I think you have to think about the Red Sox and anyone that they're overachieving for what because they've been through a bunch of injuries too.
Hmm.
So what's your take on the extension for Core? Do you like it? What's it mean? What are you looking forward to? What's your take?
I'm excited that it happened, and I think the biggest takeaway from it is, oop, I knocked my headphone out. I think the biggest thing from it is that he's going to be here with the big three prospects that we talk about all the time. So you're seeing what he's been able to do with the staff he has with guys like Duran.
Yep.
Rafael should be in the rookie of the year conversation. Um, Connor Wong's coming into his own, and Casas and all those names. And so now you're going to add in to the fact of Kyle Teal, Marcelo Meyer, Roman Anthony, maybe even guys like Christian Campbell. And now you have stability leading that helm to
Yep.
lead them going forward, where realistically, like you just said, they're performing this year. So the excitement should just be even higher now in Boston. And I
Yeah. No, what they've got coming.
like you said about the whole money thing of not being bad, like I think he kind of, in a way, addressed that in his press conference after, where he just said, my family likes to be here. I think he said when his daughter's going to be graduating soon, you know, and everybody in his family just likes being here. So it wasn't for him about the money. It was they found a home, they're comfortable, and the Red Sox, met them pretty much halfway right there, and said, "We're going to pay you like the top manager you are, but you're not going to be the top paid manager." And so they came to a deal. I really like the fact that they wanted to get it done so bad that you saw Craig Breslow fly out to Colorado, and the
Yeah,
deal
to
was
do it.
official literally like in the second inning of that game.
Yeah.
It was wild that like it said, oh, the deal is close to done, and that was before the game started. And I was like, all right, so they'll have it done maybe on the flight back on tonight, tomorrow, whatever. And then it was like the second inning, deal is done. So I'm like,
Yeah.
did Core just go down the tunnel and just sign the contract with Breslow? Like that was just how it
Wow,
came
I
out.
mean, that just to me speaks volumes. Like you're getting to flying out, showing the how important it is to Cora, to the organization, and get that done. That to me was I guess I was out of sight, out of mind with everything else going on. That I didn't expect it right now. Maybe at the end of this season,
Well, that's
expected
what they
maybe
kept telling
something to
you.
happen.
They
Yep.
kept saying we're not doing it during the season. We'll be done in the off season.
Yeah.
And then it was literally like just everything broke that day at like I think the first pitch
Yeah.
was at 3:10. It was like
Yep.
1 o'clock. It's like the news started to trickle out.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting and good. And as bad as this last series with the next team we want to talk about, the Yankees, that they didn't play well last night necessarily. Didn't pitch well. Another Tanahawk outing that was just lackluster, which we can get
I
into
wouldn't say
later.
that.
But
I wouldn't
yeah,
say
he
that.
he doesn't. He's not the punch out numbers.
No,
He was punching some people out early on, and he's just not missing the bats like he was before.
his control has definitely gone down. But I mean, thankfully you got 6 innings out of him because after the
Yeah,
first, I think you were going to get 3 or 4, and the bullpen is taxed. And so
yeah,
thankfully he was able to go 6. I thought it was interesting that I think in the aspect we're getting a little off topic, but just in the aspect of I thought it was interesting. Everybody had the gut feeling Weissert was going to get option to AAA, and they let him go to the 8th, and then you brought out Cooper Criswell for the ninth, which Cooper Criswell is now in the bullpen with the acquisition of Paxton. But why would you not have Cooper Criswell as your one healthy arm going into tonight? With Pavetta going and what Pavetta's been doing lately. Thankfully, he's pitching fantastic right now, but it's a question mark you had where, pretty much all of your bullpen except for Criswell and Weissert had thrown both Friday and Saturday.
yeah,
So, I mean, it was just one of those situations where I didn't know why they just didn't let Weissert ride it out. The game was pretty much out of hand.
yeah,
Everybody kind of just knew it. But to go to Criswell for one was an interesting call. And now Weissert sent down to Worcester, and here we are.
yeah, yeah. A little confusing, but I think the big thing is Breslow sees the value in Cora, but also sees how he's getting production from some of these guys that no one, role players or some of them maybe on other teams would be down the minors.
Hmm.
But they're getting production out of him. They've got Teal, Marcel Meyer, and Anthony coming up, as you've mentioned previously. They've got options now where they can make some moves. I know that we've talked about them perhaps looking at whether it be Crochet or someone else for a stud pitcher to kind of throw into this mix as a lefty. They've got the pieces now. You see them making a move today, but they've got some pieces to, really compete with the teams like the Orioles and the Yankees over the next few years. They've got some interesting options with things that they can do. So I'm really excited. I'm glad to have Cora back. Um, but with all that said, what's your take on the Yankees now that we've seen them for the last 3 days?
Well, they had a good series. They played well. Realistically, that could have gone either way.
Mm-hmm.
Friday night, they definitely could have won that game. Red Sox came back. Saturday, again, either way, Tyler O'Neill makes that catch against the wall. Red Sox win the series. Sunday was all Yankees. The one thing about them from the past week was that team does not want to see the New York Mets ever again
No.
this season. Um, for instance, this season, just simply, the Yankees are 0-4 against the Mets, and they've been outscored 36-14. And I want to say it was Wednesday night's game because the Sox played early, and Garrett Cole got the start, and it was just, they destroyed the Yankees. I think it was the 8th inning, and I had it on, and Garrett Cole obviously was out of the game, and they just kept scoring. Like the Mets lineup was just fun to watch that night. Um, the one player on the Mets, though, that is destroying the ball right now is Francisco Lindor. And
Yeah.
since May 18th, in 61 games, he's hitting just under 300, 929 OPS, 15 home runs, 45 runs scored, 41 RBIs, 15 stolen bases. The more so question from transitioning from the Yankees is the other team in New York, in
Yep.
the Mets, and they are currently in the final playoff spot. Is this team good enough to make the playoffs? And also, I know Otani is having the season he's having, and
Yep.
realistically should be the National League MVP.
Yep.
But should Francisco Lindor start to be in the conversation a little bit?
So I'm thinking about National League in general, right? Obviously, the loud noise in the room is Shohei,
Hmm.
which rightfully so. But after that, if the Mets were to make the playoffs, you've got a pretty strong case if at Lindor getting at least consideration and a good chunk of some votes. I don't think I think unfortunately due to I think due to what baseball's trying to do and
It's going to be
everything.
Otani.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that to take anything away from him, but at the same time, what you're saying about Lindor is valid because he's got the different stats to back it up, and he's doing everything.
And Otani's got, the Dodgers. We all came into the season and saw their roster and went, that's loaded.
Yeah, 100
Mookie,
wins.
Freeman, realistically, as we're watching it now, when we're in the end of July heading into August in the stretch run, the bottom half of that lineup isn't that
Weak.
great.
Look at the moves they're
So
making.
that kind of to me says, okay, it is Otani's, but realistically, if all the names produced and they did what everybody expected them to do for 100 wins, then they still might get there.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know, that lineup doing what they're doing, if they were where they're at and not going to reach 100 wins, you got Lindor climbing into the factor and doing what he's doing for a team that nobody had making the playoffs.
What's he doing? Two ways though. He's not the DH of the Mets.
Right.
He's also doing it daily in the field.
Hmm.
And I think too often that gets overlooked because he's got to focus on everything. And I don't think I think they gold gloves to me is a great thing, but at the same time it also takes away from the MVP talk. It's almost like in football, a defensive player can be the best player in football, but MVP, nah, never really in consideration. And in this case here with these two, Lindor and Otani, Otani's offensive numbers stand out. Power numbers are
Hmm.
there above and beyond, but Lindor's aren't that far off with as you take it as a whole. But then you put in the piece that he's playing great defense. You could easily make a case for Lindor to get votes and finish high in the MVP voting. Knowing that the percentage of votes are where they're going to end, but
Right now,
still,
he's third on DraftKings for the favorite to win MVP,
who's number two?
Bryce Harper.
Mm,
Which again, I can't disagree with, but it goes to the
no,
conversation of, like I said, with the Dodgers, of it's another team you expect to make the playoffs.
yeah,
To me, it's somebody that, like, who's the leader of a team that you didn't expect to make the playoffs. Now, granted, you look at the Yankees, we both, I don't think, had them making the playoffs. A lot of people did, had them finishing right there with the Orioles for the division. Judge is the runaway favorite right now for the American League. So,
yeah.
it's a tough conversation to have, but I think he needs to start being talked about. We had the conversation for the All-Star game where Alonso was the representative for the Mets, and I went on my tangent about how this should have been Lindor. People can also say Brandon Nimmo, but Lindor's having the better season, and Lindor's numbers, for that's the stats I gave from May 18th to now. You know, he is carrying the team. He had a terrible April, wasn't talked about much, and then all of a sudden May 18th hits and he turns things around. He's having a great season.
Yep.
Realistically, he's hitting, even with that bad April, he's hitting 255 with an 807 OPS, 27 doubles, 22 home runs, 62 RBIs, 70 runs scored, 21 stolen bases, and 40 walks.
Yeah.
That's entering tonight. So,
I really think if you see the Mets creep in and get in, he's all around. He's definitely there because both Harper's been playing a lot of DH too, right? And first.
Mostly
Or
first because Schwarber's DH.
That's right. Sure. Yeah, that's right. So, and that's right. Reese Hoskins is in Milwaukee. So, for me, I get the three. I just don't think Lindor is going to get the credit due for the year he's having,
Hmm.
unfortunately. So, with that all being said, and we can give a quick rundown and stop me, interrupt me at any point in time with these standings update that I'm going to give that you helped you put together. But if there's anything that stands out, stop me. So we're going to go through the standings, division leaders first. The Phillies are safe right now. They have a 8.5 game lead in the American League East. The Brewers currently have a 6 game lead in the National League Central. The Dodgers have a 6.5 game lead in the NL West. In the American League East, the Orioles have a 1 game lead over the New York Yankees, previously mentioned. The Cleveland Guardians have a 4.5 game lead in the American League Central over the Minnesota Twins. And then out west, which could very well be one of the funnest, other than the American League East, division battles to watch will be Houston and Seattle tied, both making moves, which we'll get to in a little bit. But that's going to be a fun one to watch to see what plays out there in the West, to see who can hold on and who ends up taking that division. In the National League wild card, the Braves are 1.5 game up. Then you've got the Padres. Wait a minute. Is that just 1 second?
That's from I believe, the first team out.
Yep. So I'm just pulling it up here for my own knowledge to make sure that I'm not screwing up. So the Braves are a game and a half up with the first wild card. The Padres are a half game up with the fifth spot, and the Mets hold the last place in the playoffs right now. They hold a game and a half or a half game lead over the Diamondbacks, but they have a game in hand. And then the Cardinals have a game in hand with the Mets and are 1 game back. And then Pittsburgh has a couple games in hand and are 2 games back. The Giants are 3.5 back. Then you've got the Cubs at 5 and Cincinnati at 5 games back, and the Nationals are 6.5 games back. I think realistically, it will come down to the first 3 teams mentioned: the Diamondbacks, Cardinals, and Pittsburgh. The Giants aren't that far back, but there's unless they do something, they
They're
just
moving Snell from what it sounds like. So,
it sound but okay. So we'll get to that in the trade piece next. Um, and I want to get your opinion on that in regards to like when we get to that. I'll finish the
mhm.
American League wild card, and then we'll get into these trades. But right now, the Yankees have a 4.5 game lead over the first wild card spot. The Twins have a 2 game lead in the fifth spot, and Kansas City currently has the last spot in the playoffs. With that said, Boston is a game behind Kansas City, but they have 2 games in hand. Then you have Seattle a game and a half back, which would mean the Astros are also a game and a half back, and they both have one. They played one more game than Kansas City. Both teams. Tampa Bay is 3 games back. With the moves they're making, I would assume that they're okay if a miracle happens, but I think they're not rebuilding, retooling, I guess, and resetting for 2025. And then you've got Detroit at 5.5, and then Texas at 6 games, and everyone else below is already moving pieces. So the playoff picture is starting to take shape. I think over the next couple of weeks, we'll see that final wild card spot. You may see some people jump
Mhm.
in levels in regards to the fourth, fifth, and sixth spot. But it's going to be interesting to watch, and I'm really interested and tuned into the American League West with the Astros and Mariners right now because they both have made moves, which we'll get to. But it's going to be a fun stretch, if you will, to see what happens. Anything Is there any team that you see in these wild card races that are further back than say 3 games that you'd be like, "Yep, I can see that happening." Them sneaking in and grabbing like the sixth spot.
Anybody really in the National League wild card,
Yep.
any of those teams, it's the Pirates have the pitching to get there. We talk about that almost all the time. Jared Jones, I haven't seen any update on him. But again, at the end of the day, I think Passon put it out yesterday or 2 days ago or something like that, where the Pirates are like his sneak pick to get in, along the lines of they're going to be scary with Jones, Skeens, and Keller. That's one team. The Diamondbacks, they're making some quiet moves. The Cardinals, they made a move today, which we'll get to. The Giants are an iffy one at 3.5. Like we said, we'll get to that one. And then the American League wild card, that Seattle, Houston, Boston, Minnesota, Kansas City race is a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
I'm as a Red Sox fan, I really obviously am hoping the Red Sox get in. But I mean, thankfully right now, a big series. I think the next 2 weeks for the Red Sox is going to tell you everything you need to know. I
Correct.
mean,
I
they got
agree with that.
Seattle tonight. I think they got Texas, and then I believe Kansas or Houston, then Kansas City, then Houston, and then Texas again. So it's all
That
the
Kansas
teams.
City series could be a key one,
Yep, and
depending
it's
on
all
how both
right
teams
there.
play.
All of them are right there because, like I said, like you
Yep.
just said, Seattle and Houston tied 1.5 back.
Yep.
So you're, I think, what you're facing 6 games. I think they have for those two between those two. So you're
Well, and you think
really
about it, who the Rangers, the Rangers are further back, but they're getting healthier. And if they're playing weaker competition while the rest of these guys that are fighting are battling it out, they could creep up and make it closer too. So it's
right.
going to be very interesting. There's a lot of stuff here. I think there's only Jesus. There's only really looking at it. There's only 2 divisions in all of baseball that I think are probably won't change, and that's the Phillies and the Dodgers.
That's probably where
Any
I am
other
too.
division, even with the Brewers at 6 games, I think given the recent news and them being very quiet at the deadline to this point, I think they're the only two. The Guardians have a 4.5 game lead and seem to continue to keep that at the Twins at bay. But there's a lot of divisions that are still up for grabs, and that's good for baseball.
Very good for baseball.
Perfect. So before we get into what's going on, we'll take a break here and we'll do a few little things. But anyone that wants to join us, we've mentioned this each podcast. We've put it out on socials. But if you're looking to join our team and write about baseball, whether that be a favorite team, favorite division, or even a favorite minor league team, reach out to us at insidethediamonds.com/join us and let us know what you're thinking. Ask any questions you may have. We cover anything from roster moves to opinion pieces to covering the trades, giving details, series recaps, series previews. We talk, CJ's been doing a lot about the prospects. So if you've got any interest at all, don't hesitate. Reach out, ask whatever questions you have. CJ can give you a little bit of a rundown in regards to how it all works, how the flow goes, what the communication is, how you um, claim articles that you want to write, but also the expectations in regards to what we're hoping for. We are still trying to grow, getting the views up on a monthly basis, daily basis. So if you're interested in writing about baseball or just interested in joining us and have questions, please go to the website insidethediamonds.com/join us and let us know what you're thinking. And then CJ can give you a rundown of what we need and what would be a best fit. So, all right. We've touched about it briefly, and I can't get it out of my head. The Dodgers made 2 moves today alone. They got Rosario, who's played short for them before. He also played second for them before
Mhm.
last year when he came over from the Guardians. You've got Mookie Betts, who's banged up, who's been playing short. Then they made a trade with the Cardinals earlier today for in that 3-team trade. They got Tommy Edman and they got Michael Kopechek from the White Sox. In a perfect world, if you've got Betts healthy, Edman healthy, and obviously I'm going to leave Lux out, but you've got Rosario healthy. Do they look at their outfield right now and be like, our best bet is moving Mookie back out to center, let Rosario and Edman play up the middle, or do you just let Edman? And I'm not sure if he's played yet this year or if he just came back, but he's banged up too. So they're getting someone, and I don't know his contract details, but it would be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens out in Los Angeles in regards to how they utilize these assets. You mentioned it earlier about Kike, and to me, you only move Kike if you know 100% that Edmonds coming back within the next 14 days. Betts is healthy. But even so, at this rate, are you going to get a prospect now for Kike that you couldn't get in the offseason?
No.
You know what I mean? So when you mentioned that, I was like, yeah, that can make sense if and only if these guys are healthy. And it also makes you wonder, what do they know about Betts that we don't?
Right. I mean, Muncie's on the 60-day IL, so
Mm-hmm.
Kike is realistically could be the third baseman. The other interesting thing too is so you like you just said they got Rosario, they got Edmund, but Kevin Biggio, they have Nick Ahmed. So there's definitely something going on, I think, with Mookie that we don't know about. That they're just addressing the infield because the outfield isn't that bad. Hayward's been okay. Teoscar is having a great season, and Andy Pages is not too bad in center field. So I
Yeah.
mean, they're okay in the outfield. And again, at the end of the day, you can put he has been great, but you can put Outman out there. You can also put Kike out there. Chris Taylor's hurt. Miguel Rojas is hurt. So those two names that, like I said with Mookie, are they just more hurt than we thought? So,
Could and I don't know enough about Ahmad Rosario. I know in the past he's been strictly a middle infielder. And
that's
I
right.
know that if Gavin Lux can't make the throw from short, he sure as shit ain't
No,
moving to third.
no.
So, and Edmund, I don't believe. I know he's played second. I know he's played short, and I know he's played out in the outfield. I don't believe he's ever played third because
He
I
might
don't
have.
believe he might have. But I'm just thinking in regards to Kevin Biggio is a nice depth piece.
Yes, he
I'm
can
a
play
little
outfield.
shocked that they didn't go after Justin Turner, to be honest.
Same.
To play third because that seems to be a glaring hole right now, and they seem to need some stability in that bottom half of the order. Turner batting seventh in that lineup
Isn't
changes
it?
some things in how it looks. It fits. He would be terrific there, but I'll be
Edmund has
very
played.
interested.
Edmund has played third base. 94 games at third base.
He just hasn't played it all this year, which is
No, well, he hasn't played at all this year. In
no.
2023, he played second, center, right. Um, I think that's all I see. Second, center, right, and short. The last time he played third base was 8 games in 2022, and he also played third base in 2020. He played 31 games of the 60 games there, and he came up
Yeah.
as a third baseman in 2019, playing 55 games at third base.
So they're definitely making some different moves to prepare themselves for whatever. But I really think it's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully Mookie comes back healthy.
Hmm.
I would assume if that's the case, Rosario goes to second. But if Edmund comes back, which I haven't heard anything about him in regards to what his timetable is, that could have just been a move to a piece thrown in for them for next year at this rate or playoffs. Um, it'll be interesting. So, with that said, let's talk about some of the other trades. We talked about the Dodgers trade. Why don't we finish out that 3-team deal where Vargas and two other prospects went to the White Sox with Kopechek going to the Dodgers. and the Cardinals ended up getting Tommy Pham, and they received Eric Freedy.
Well, that's the interesting move to me because Eric Fetty made sense to go to the Brewers,
Yep,
and a team that's chasing you in your division just swooped right in and got him in a three-team deal. So, we talk about the struggles for the Cardinals right now, but that's a move that says we're taking him away from you, and he's going to
yep,
benefit us, and we're going to catch you. And that to me makes the conversation of, we talked about the Brewers start the podcast, and it's if the Brewers don't do anything, then the door is wide open for the other. Really, I think the other four teams, because even 11 games back, you're gonna face each other. You're gonna beat up on each other come September. It opens the door
yep.
for everybody. Um, I really like Tommy Pham going to St. Louis. It
So do
also
I.
I saw this random stat today. Heim Bloom loves Tommy Pham.
Yeah, it does.
He acquired him when he was in Tampa. He acquired him when he was with the Red Sox, and now even though he's not the chief baseball operations for St. Louis, they find a way to bring him to St. Louis where Heim Bloom is.
Yep,
So I like the interesting move. I really like that I don't think it's talked about from that trade. Miguel Vargas to the White Sox.
yep.
Is that a signal potentially Luis Robert being traded by tomorrow? Like there's a conversation being had and Luis Robert's out. Now I know Robert plays right. Miguel Vargas is usually this year it seems like played left field. Um, but it's an outfield bat that is younger than I think he's younger than Robert. Robert's young.
What if
I want to say
Robert
he's
ends up
younger.
in Milwaukee? You
Now
know what
we
I
open the
mean?
door to the conversation again that Milwaukee's the team again.
They need so
But
Milwaukee's in a phase where either they're gonna do nothing and be like, hey, look, we probably shouldn't have been here anyway. We've got young pitching coming up. We've got some underperforming young guys. Do we want to take away from our core when we're not going to win the World Series?
yeah,
Do they just stand pat, which I can see them almost doing something like that or doing something similar to like what Tampa has done in the past, looking at let all the big guys go and start fishing in some smaller ponds to see if they, you know what I mean? But I think anything they do, I do not see Milwaukee going at sorry, I do not see Milwaukee going after a rental.
yeah.
If they're
And
going to give something up,
Robert is younger.
yeah. So I think they'll be very calculated, see what they do, see what the asking price is, and grab pieces that are not just for this playoff stretch potentially, but for next year because they do have the arms coming. You've mentioned Woodruff coming back. They still have Freddie Peralta. They have some of these young pitchers in the minors. It'll be interesting, but the Brewers are a team for me that I'm watching because if they don't do anything, I think it could be almost just as good for them as if they went out and got something.
Hmm.
Given in regard, I mean, they're very realistic organization of where they're going to be, so that'll be interesting. Now,
Some of
you
the asking
mentioned,
prices are high too. So like, are they
yeah,
taking the
right
step
now, I'm
up because
sure,
they
yeah,
don't want to move certain pieces? Like they like what they have in the system. Like we talk about Jacob Misrowski,
hmm,
talk about Gasser.
yep,
Other names like Tyler Black, who's made his debut this year, as teams asking for that for guys that have control. Like is that the thing they're looking for? They're looking for names that have control for beyond this year. And obviously, if that's the case, then teams are coming and saying, "Hey, we want so and so, like a bigger name prospect." Like that's the one thing with all these trades, you don't really see a top 10 prospect being moved, except for I think the biggest one was yesterday was Jason Adam going to Tampa, and the key piece going back. I mean, going from Tampa to San Diego, and the key piece going to Tampa from that was Dylan Lesko, who was in the top 100 for ITD. So I mean, I think that was the biggest name prospect wise to be moved.
yep.
And so I get, that just goes to the asking price. That the relievers are fetching the biggest prospect haul, whereas
Yep.
the starting pitchers, the bats, they're not bringing in what you would expect them to bring in.
No. So let's run down just a couple of others that have happened. Jazz Chisholm, who went to the Yankees and actually started at third base tonight and hit his home run. I believe that
Yep,
it was tonight. Um, Carlos Estevez has been traded this weekend to the Phillies,
I think
which
that
I
makes the
think is
Phillies World Series favorites because
100%.
now they have the best bullpen I think in baseball, and they rank in the top in most of the categories.
Yeah.
And they had what, two, maybe three relievers named to the All Star team.
Yeah.
And another trade we'll talk about in a minute, like they moved, um, you know, Sir Anthony Dominguez and Kristen Pache to Baltimore and got
For
Austin
Austin
Hayes.
Hayes.
And Austin Hayes isn't, anything special, but it's a piece in the outfield that they needed and has helped out. So I think realistically, like if that's the two moves and that's it for the Phillies, that team is easily the favorite.
He's definitely a defensive upgrade out in the outfield. He's not going to wow you, but he's not going to kill you at the plate either. Bottom of the order. And I think obviously moving Sir Anthony Dominguez, you knew something else was coming. But like you said, if you have a bullpen like that and you can afford to give up and make a swap to make your team better and not really damaging your team, and then to go out and get Estevez, basically, you look at it, you traded Sir Anthony Dominguez in a prospect, I believe, for Austin Hayes and Carlos Estevez.
Another prospect because
Well, a couple
Pache's
of
been around
pros.
for a couple of years. I think he
Yeah,
was in Atlanta.
Pache started. He started with the
Atlanta,
Braves.
I
Yeah,
think so.
so they swapped some pieces around there, and if you're a Phillies fan, you have to like what they're doing. They're not taking away from the future, that's going to crush you. They're just continue to add, and because you got to think for them too, they know just as well as anyone that what they're adding now, they're hoping helps them not just this year but next year as well.
It's a Dave
Because the Braves
Dombrowski
aren't going
special.
away.
It's what he does. Dave Dombrowski just loves to sell prospects, and both of these trades, which helped the Phillies big time, he's not
Yep.
trading any top prospects like he did in Boston.
No.
And
So the
people like to
first,
say all the time about the prospect system after he left, and he actually helped some prospects.
yeah,
Duran's one of his.
yep.
So,
People forget that. You know what I mean? They forget once they're gone, they assume it's the new regime.
mhm.
So I believe, am I wrong? Was Randy Arozarena the first trade? Really
Second,
big trade. Second, who was the
first,
first one?
first big trade. It was the second one. The first one was AJ Puck from
Oh
Miami
yes,
to Arizona.
yep, that's right. Another reliever. So Randy Arozarena is now with Seattle, which we spoke last week about Julio Rodriguez injury.
Hmm.
So getting Randy out there in Seattle, he hasn't been the same, or it hasn't produced to the level he did his rookie year when he made that playoff run. But at the same time, he hasn't been surrounded by the same. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that was a good move by Seattle, and I
He
think
just
he
homered.
will play well. Did he just homer?
Yep.
He's a gamer. He really is a gamer, and I think he's the type that when you're in it and you're up at the top of the standings and it's impactful each night, he just comes to play. So I'll be
What
very interested to see how that does.
What do you think of how he handled it all? So I don't know if you saw the clip from the weekend. He got traded Thursday. It was like 1:30 my time when I
Yep.
saw it, or our time when I saw it.
Yep.
Um, but so apparently he told Seattle he would be there Saturday, stayed behind Friday, and actually sat in left field in Randyland at the
Yep.
Trop and watched the Rays play and sat with the fans. And then I think it was like in the third or fourth inning or something like that, he left and like got ready to leave. But he
Yep.
wanted to take it in with the fans and be a part of it, which I really liked a lot. I mean, that's a team. He didn't start there. Like he got his big league debut there, but he
Yep.
was a Cardinals start. Then he ended up with the Rays, and that's the team that gave him his big break. So he stayed to take it all in for a couple innings, and then left.
Yep. I like it. I think I think that spoke volumes. I mean, obviously, anytime a guy gets traded during a game, um, you're interested in see how they react. I think what he did for the fans and just the appreciation makes you like him even more, root for him even more. Just a lot of guys would be like, I'm out of here, I want to go. But he knew they weren't making the playoffs, but he stayed around for appreciation. What?
We got Jalen Beeks going to the Pirates.
Really?
hmm And they are getting Double A left-handed pitcher Luis Peralta to Colorado.
Okay, that's interesting. But I like it. I think Beeks is left-handed, right? Reliever
hmm
from was a Red Sox. He's out in Colorado.
Tampa.
Okay, Tampa. That's
He
right.
was part of the
And
Eovaldi trade.
yes, he was
He was that.
interesting.
He was the name.
Okay, so the other trade, there's a couple of other trades we've talked about. Tommy Edman and Kopechek going to the Dodgers. Pham and Free Fetty going to St. Louis. Vargas, Alexander Albertus, and Jarrell Perez back to the White Sox.
That trade keeps changing, so I don't even know who the prospects
Yeah,
are.
and I think it probably will continue until they figure it out. But the other trade that happened today that you and I have talked about was between the Boston Red Sox and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Nick York heading to the Pirates for Quinn Priester. And we both have talked previously, and I like the trade. I mean, I liked Priester as a potential holding that fifth spot for Skeens to start the year, just but due to the fact of his control and the ground ball pitcher. What'd you think of the trade?
I like the trade for both sides. And realistically, when we talked about this, so I've followed Priester since he got to Altoona, and I've thought he could be something that, in the right situation, if he figures everything out, he could be a good pitcher. Nick York liked him for the Red Sox. Obviously, when he got drafted, nobody was thrilled about it because he wasn't a first round guy. Like nobody saw him as a first round guy. Red Sox loved him out of high school. Believe he had a shoulder issue his senior year and didn't play much. I think it was also the COVID year, if I remember correctly. No, that was Meyer, so it might have been the year before, a couple years before. But he's one of those guys where we talk about at end that the Red Sox are blocked. Every outfield position is a question mark, and that's where he started to play out. He started to play outfield, and then the infield got blocked. You traded Sale for Von Grissom. You got Meyer, you got Devers, you got Casas. So where's he fit in? So the writing on the wall was for York to be traded this trade deadline or this offseason. Um, I think a lot of Red Sox fans, judging by what I saw on Twitter, wanted it to be a bigger name for York because of what he had been doing at AAA. I mean, he was tearing the cover off the ball once he got
Yeah.
to AAA. So I think people expected more. The thing with Priester is he, despite not being in the top 100 because he's not a prospect anymore,
Yep.
he's right away going. Both of those guys are going right to AAA for their respective teams. But Priester is a guy where we, especially me, have glorified the Andrew Bailey effect,
Mm-hmm.
where he's a guy that I think with Bailey can turn into something. He's a five pitch pitcher. He's got a high ground ball percentage. He doesn't issue walks. He is the definition of fitting into the Andrew Bailey mold. And that's why I think this trade was done. He's under control. So he's under team control.
Yep.
Um, he fits right in to what the Red Sox need. He's not, when I say he fits in right to the Red Sox need, it's more along the lines of like we talk about their farm system and, the big three that are coming up. But we don't talk about the pitching that's there. And there's a couple names to watch, but they're not top 100 guys. They're just barely, trickling into the top 10. Um, but Priester's a guy that you could watch this year at Worcester and along the lines, maybe towards the end of the season when the bullpen might be tired or there's an injury and you need a starter, you could see him called up and see what he can do, and you have a glimpse into something. So realistically, the trade from both sides, because I loved watching the Pirates. I got the game on my little TV right now because they're playing the Astros with Skeens on the mound. I think both guys realistically should be up by the middle to end of August. I think York deserves his shot at the big leagues, and I think he should get it this year. It's an outfield bat that could be used. Um, so I like that trade. I like a lot. The other trade that happened today that I don't think you mentioned was Justin Turner to the Mariners,
Yeah.
and that's I thought he was coming to Boston.
Yeah, that one made a
That was
lot
a
of
reunion.
sense.
I thought that was a reunion. Now he's coming to Fenway, but not for the Red Sox.
The one thing the one thing with the Turner move, I think it makes perfect sense. In Ty France was also traded today, who after being designated, he's going to the Reds. Um, the trade from this weekend that really to me is like I understand why the leash was so long, and it kind of when we were talking about Randy staying in Randy land is the Christopher Morel going to Tampa and Isaac Paredes coming to the Chicago Cubs. I watched that video several times of Morel leaving and just saying his goodbyes. The guy is just such an energetic guy, so much appreciation for the game. And I look at him and Randy being very similar in regards to their approach to the life, I guess, the life of baseball and the appreciation. And for me, as much as I loved Christopher Morel just because of his energy, he wasn't hitting the ball
Mhm.
for average. It was just power. I had mentioned it early on that the Cubs trying to get Isaac Paredes and actually Randy in a trade to play, out in the outfield because at that point in time they hadn't signed Bellinger. But I think Isaac Paredes is a great move. The Cubs also traded for Nate Pearson. The Red Sox traded the reliever from Toronto. The Red Sox also made a trade and got Danny Jensen, who could be the first player ever to play for both teams in one game because of that suspended
Yep.
game with Toronto. So I
Yep.
thought that's pretty cool. Obviously, the coinciding move was Reese McGuire had been DFA'd, which there's a whole podcast we could do on him alone.
Yeah.
Reese McGuire and his stuff. That might be a different one. But there's been a lot of trades happening. There's a
Paxton.
lot more. Paxton, that's right. I think that the biggest names left Robert, Crochet.
He's not moving.
Um, you don't think he's going to move?
Crochet shot himself in the foot.
True.
His
True.
comments about he won't pitch in the playoffs unless there's an extension. All of a sudden, his name's dropped off the table. Nobody wants him anymore.
Well, it is funny. Well, how much of that's got to do with, guy saying well, I mean, unless he likes Chicago that much, all of a sudden, since he shot himself in the foot, as you mentioned, Blake Snell's popped up.
Yep.
And to me, how the hell do you move Blake Snell and get anything in return other than someone being utterly, ridiculously, like, overwhelmed with people being blocked prospect wise that could benefit San Francisco and taking a shot on a guy to get him for who he was last year. We had this conversation early on. He's an every other year guy,
Hmm.
it seems, recently. I don't I can't even imagine what would you I mean, okay, let's say it's Boston. Where are you starting with? What are you offering?
I think so. I think at the end of the day, no matter what happens with Snell, I think the reason he's available is I think they're expecting like a 5:30 full blown panic phone call from somebody. I
Yep.
think that was just a rumor, just to know Crochet did what he did, and everybody's
Mhm.
gonna watch School Bowl. School Bowl is gonna be the name to watch until about 4 o'clock, and then I don't think he's moving. And then I think somebody's gonna panic once they see Flaherty get moved, and then no, the other two aren't going anywhere, and they're gonna call San Francisco for Snell, and they're gonna overpay. It's gonna be a panic move right at 5:30, right to get the trade in right before the deadline, and that's the only thing that makes sense to me on why his name has surfaced. Is they know that's gonna be the case. Is they're gonna call, some teams gonna call Chicago about Crochet, and they're gonna think about it, and then they're gonna try to talk to him because they're gonna try to get permission to talk to him.
Yeah.
and try to do like a sign and trade, like try to get like a trade done, get the extension done right away. But if they can't do that, then they're not going to waste their time and they're going to pivot. And at that point, it's going to be like 5 o'clock, last ditch effort. They're going to make the phone call to White Sox. Not going to happen. 5:30 comes 5:45. Okay, fine. Let's just go get Blake Snell. We need a left-handed pitcher. Let's go do it.
So it's funny you mentioned that because we had talked last week and I threw out Justin Steele. You have to wonder some of these teams that, I mean, James Tyon is a name that's been thrown out and it seems to have quiet recently as an arm, but
I think
Justin
they're waiting for
Steele,
that's a Flaherty move. Once Flaherty's decided, they'll
yeah,
see what
yeah, I
happens
think
next.
there's tiers, like you said. I think
Mhm.
once this one drops, or okay, asking price move down the second tier. But I think with the Cubs having Shota now, and they still have Jordan Wicks, who I think there's something there, but he reminds me way too friggin' much of Boston's Eduardo Rodriguez not
Mhm.
World Series years. Because Jesus, I don't know if I've seen two pitchers that see more full counts than those two guys, left-handers. So I think the Cubs probably mentioned or maybe leaked the Steele stuff simply to see what they get for a last ditch call when Crochet doesn't get moved. So it'll be interesting. I think we both believe that the most likely next bat to move, at least I do. I don't know. I'll see if you agree. Is Brent Rooker,
Yeah,
just because of where he is in Oakland.
but they're
They're
reluctant.
moving.
They're reluctant to trade him. That came out yesterday.
Why?
I
Who the hell's going to see him in Sacramento for 2 years?
I think they're hoping that they
You
compete
can
in two
only
years.
fit
They're not
5,500
going
people
to.
there.
Yeah, but I think their hope is to compete, and they're not going to. But
No.
I think that's their hope.
I'm shocked though because maybe their whole plan changed once Miller broke his hand.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because they could have got a bunch of prospects and they could have retooled, like almost grabbed a bunch of prospects, but then flipped some for some guys with control.
Hmm.
And again, all this shit is speculation until it happens. I mean, I don't think either one of us. We were talking about York being called up instead of Jamie Westbrook.
Yeah,
So, is there any surprise name that hasn't really been talked about that you could see getting moved in the next, you know, next 20 hours, 20 and a half hours?
we haven't talked about him. I think I might have last week. I think he was my third pitcher. I really think with Kikuchi moving, I think Bassett's the name to watch.
Yeah, I would rather
And
have him than James Taillon,
same.
honestly.
And one other name that hasn't been talked about, he just came back. I want to say like 2, 3 weeks ago. But what are the Rockies doing? Like they're
Mm,
not competing this year. Are they competing next year? I don't think so. I think I said last week when we talked about prospects, probably 2 years from now, when all those guys in Double A come up and they start to get their experience and they're good to go. Because I think a lot of those guys get their debuts next season. So what about a name like Kyle Freeland? That's somebody who for years I've wanted to come to Boston, but again he just came back. So is that why teams don't talk about him? And then I don't know his contract situation. I don't know how long he's under contract for. So obviously he's not somebody who's up after this year. Um, you know, it's just that's a name that I feel like I hear about him. Like it was like the years when the Marlins weren't good before he passed
yeah,
away. Like you heard about Jose Fernandez going somewhere.
yeah.
Like every year it was mentioned at the deadline, never got moved, and then everything happened. But I feel like other than this year, Kyle Freeland was a name that you heard quite a bit about for the Rockies, and now this year
I th-
obviously it's nothing.
I think that is, if you look at the left hand and take Snell out of this picture, because I honestly agree with you, and I think Justin Steele's the same way. They're gonna have to have their socks blown off. It's gonna have to be a stupid proposal to get him out. I mean, Snell not so much as Steele, but I don't I don't Snell maybe will move, but Freeland after Kikuchi is probably. one of the better lefties you could get. Veteran. He's not going to wow you, but at the same time, he generally eats innings. And if you take him out of Coors Field, and actually give him some run support, that he's a serviceable lefty that could fit. Oh, I don't know if the Twins would want to make a call there, but they're one team with a right-handed heavy rotation that I thought Kikuchi made a lot of sense there. So the Twins are another team I'm interested to see what happens at the deadline if they do anything. But with
Speaking
all
of the
that said,
Twins, before you move on, they're down 11-1 to the Mets right now.
down 11-1.
Yep.
Yeah, I see Alonso had a home run.
Yep.
I
Tough
don't I
set.
don't I don't get that. I don't get the Twins team. Honestly, their pitching staff is, besides Ryan, not Joe Rogan by any means, Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober. We've talked about Kent Maeda, not Kent Maeda, Pablo Lopez has been off this year. I really like Simon Richardson. I think he's
He
someone
got
that
teed
could do.
off tonight.
Is he the one that would pitch
Yeah.
tonight? Figures. Probably didn't pull him from my lineups.
He went
Um,
3 and a third, gave up 6 runs on 7 hits, walked 3, and struck out 2.
oh, that's efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So it's again, we mentioned it from the start. It sucks that the deadline is not tonight and that it's tomorrow because we're not going to be live or be able to do anything. We will cover and do a recap. Hopefully next Monday night. I'm on vacation, but hopefully I can do it Monday night and kind of break down, the trades, what happened, what it means for everyone moving forward. But we'll keep you posted if anything else happens the rest of tonight while we're live in the next 10 minutes or so. But I wanted to move into, unless there's anything else trade
Nope.
wise that you want to mention.
Nope. I'll tell you if I get anything else while we're moving.
The only other guy I want to see moved is I don't want to see him get moved, but I want to see him play in Kansas City is Nico Horner at second. And I'm a
Yeah.
Cubs fan. I don't want to see him go, but they get a log jam there, and he could be one that could be moved there, and that would be interesting to see him there. And the other guy to Kansas City that makes some sense to me if they wanted to make a move would be Bellinger because you don't have to sign him. But if you're looking for something, Cubs won't be asking for a huge amount because I don't think he's going anywhere due to injuries. But the Kansas City Royals are a team I'd like to see the Cubs linked up with. So, with that said, why don't you talk to us about your top prospects? And I noticed the one at the bottom. I was going to send you a message because I was watching and listening when that news broke. So why don't you go ahead and give us the rundown of your top prospects?
So just before we get into all the numbers, the new rankings is updated. It will be
Nice.
coming out hopefully August 1st. I think I'll put it out. Um, if not by this weekend. My goal is I have it all done in a spreadsheet. It's all updated. I just have to transfer it over to a format. So the numbers I give you right now on rankings are the updated rankings. So the first one, I did 3 hitters, 1 pitcher, and then I'll get 2 names I want to talk about from this past week.
Okay.
So the first one's Max Clark. He's the 10th ranked prospect on our top 100. He's just finished his first week at High A, and he went 8 for 22 with 2 doubles, a triple, 5 RBIs, 4 runs scored, and a walk. That is Max Clark. And I realistically, I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to try to put together. Probably won't be this year. It'll be next year because this whole prospecting is new. I want to do like MLB Pipeline does and start thinking about ETAs and
Okay.
see
Yeah.
realistically when we can start seeing these guys. Max Clark is a guy though just climbed up. Was drafted last year in June, and he's already at High A. So
Yeah.
realistically, we could be talking. We see him probably 2026, maybe 25 at some point, depending upon where the Tigers are at.
Yeah.
Actually, no, probably 2026. I don't think he jumps that quick. A lot of these guys are all High A. So the next one is the 76th ranked prospect. It's shortstop Sebastian Walcott from the Texas Rangers. Last week he went 7 for 23 with a double, 2 home runs, 4 RBIs, 3 runs scored, 3 walks, and a stolen base. And the final one is one of my favorite to watch. He's from the University of Vanderbilt. I hope I didn't just screw that up and piss off a lot of Vanderbilt people. But he's from Vanderbilt. I really hope now it's going to bug me. So Vanderbilt or University of Vanderbilt?
It's
Vanderbilt
Vanderbilt
University.
University. Yeah.
It's Vanderbilt University. He's the
Yep.
96th ranked prospect, high A for the Baltimore Orioles. It's Enrique Bradfield. And I've
Yep.
been high on him since he got drafted. He's a guy with a lot of speed on the bases. He went 5 for 17 with 3 doubles, 4 RBIs, 5 runs scored, 4 walks, and 2 stolen bases. So a lot of those high A guys, it's gonna be interesting to watch, especially with two of them where I follow a lot of the Eastern League. I'll be seeing a lot of them probably next year because they're one level away from the Double A. The final one is your guy, pitcher Rhett Lauder
Yep.
from Double A for the Cincinnati Reds. Out of the top 100 pitchers, he had the best week, and it wasn't even close.
Yep.
He got a win, going 6 innings, didn't allow a run, gave up 1 hit, didn't issue a walk, and struck out 6.
Yep.
I mean, the way he's pitching this year, you got to
He's looked
realistically start
good.
wondering.
He's looked really, really good. I'm surprised they still have him at Chattanooga and not up at Louisville.
That's what I was going to say. Is Louisville's got to be coming soon. I mean, we say the same thing about the Red Sox big three. Like, when are they going to
Yeah.
Worcester? So, realistically, I think he's got to be start. The conversation's going to start for him to go to Louisville.
Yeah.
So moving aside from the prospects of the week that I want to talk about, the first news is Travis Bazzana, the first overall pick to the Cleveland Guardians. He signed his contract and he made his debut at High A. And last week in 2 games, he went 2 for 7 with a double, an RBI, and 2 runs scored. He looked pretty good at the plate, looked comfortable. Um, and he was, to me, one of the best hitting prospects coming into this draft. I know everybody wanted Charlie Condon in the first 3 picks. He ended up realistically going to Colorado.
Yeah.
But Pisano, to me, was a lot of fun to watch at Oregon State. He's a good hitter. Definitely somebody to watch that could quickly rise through the ranks for the Guardians as if they need more talent to it, that team.
Quan loved him. Quan spoke
Yeah.
extremely high of him. Another Oregon State guy. So very interesting.
And the final bit of prospect news, this one actually was a tough one this week that I saw. He's 49th overall prospect in the top 100. Also, before I say his name, the rookies, the prospects that were drafted, some of them will also be in this month's top 100, which is why it's coming out in August. So Bazzana
Nice.
is on the list. I didn't want to tease and give away where he's coming in the rankings at, so I left the numbers off for him. But the 49th overall prospect, Ricky Tiedemann, has been announced he's undergoing Tommy John surgery.
Yeah. It's too
This
bad.
season, in 8 games started, he was 0-1 with a 5.19 ERA, a 167 WHIP, 27 strikeouts in 17 and a third innings. He's the top prospect for the Blue Jays, based on our rankings. They were hoping on him coming up this year, kind of banking on him, I think, to be, a number 5 guy for them. It didn't work out, and then it's kind of been a downfall from there since it didn't work out with his first injury, where it was, Bowden Francis got the nod out of spring training. Then it was more of a piggyback where they went Yariel Rodriguez into Francis, and Rodriguez just got sent down. Francis started tonight. I don't know the score of that game right now. I haven't seen it on my TV once, but it's tough news for a guy. So obviously undergoing Tommy John right now, probably ends his 2025 campaign as well. So
Yeah.
realistically, probably don't expect to see him until 2026. And the Blue Jays are selling, so now Kikuchi's going to be gone. We talked about Bassett. So the rotation is starting to get slim, and they don't have very many prospects coming.
No,
I
they
mean, there's
don't.
2 in the top 100. They got a little bit better tonight with that trade for Kikuchi as the, final names are coming in. We also have a trade that just came through. The
Okay.
Brewers
Who was
got
it?
the Brewers got their starting pitcher. They got Frankie Montas from the Reds.
No shit.
No return yet.
Okay.
So
He's
yeah,
been pitching well. I mean, he hasn't been getting the run support. He has not been bad this year. It's been very similar to previous years for Montez, where he's been consistent, but just no run support. He's had a couple bad outings, but he hasn't been bad.
it's interesting that they're doing it within the division.
A
It's
little
always interesting
shocked.
to me. So
That was a 2-year deal, though. So ultimately, it's not a huge. He wasn't long. I mean, we just mentioned Louder. Um, I'm a little shocked, considering Graham Ashcraft was just moved to the 60-day injured list. So Hey, the Reds have to do something. They realize I'll be very interested to see what the return is.
Yep.
Um, but that's not a shocker.
Yep. So
All right.
that's all I have on the prospects front. I have no update on the return yet for Montas, but
Okay.
he's going to the Brewers.
Interesting. I will probably might not be tonight, but I might do a little recap of that for the Reds tomorrow in regards to what their return was and what that means for the rotation. So to end this, I'm not going to get into too much in depth because we're already over an hour. I want to keep this short and sweet. Um, I've already seen your week ahead, and I think given what we know about the standings, why don't you go ahead and do the week matchups, and I'll do the weekends. But if you've got something specific to add in, by all means, trying to keep it short and sweet. So, who are your top two matchups for this week?
The first one is Yankees Phillies. The Phillies are clearly the best team in the National League. The Yankees are making moves to compete with the Orioles for the AL East. So at the end of the day, we could be talking about that being a World Series preview and a 2009 rematch, um, which I think the Phillies are better, just not tonight. I think it's still, the last I saw was 3-1. I haven't got an update on a score. Um, but I think that's going to be a fun series to watch. The other one, and we mentioned the race right now, it's the Red Sox and the Mariners with them being separated by a half a game. So I think this
Yep.
series is huge to the long run of the season. It can make or break either side, even with the trade deadline. Arozarena and Turner are going to be Mariners. Turner probably will play, my guess is tomorrow or Wednesday.
Yeah.
So you get to see the full Mariners lineup and what they could be for the rest of this run. But the Red Sox, you get to see, are they going to compete still? And this
Yep.
is proof in this tough stretch. 2-7 out of the break. They're up 14-3 right now in the eighth on game one. So those are my
That's
two big
huge because
series.
their bats were quiet last night,
Yeah, they were.
but Rondon looked good. So your weekend series, and I think obviously, for what matters for baseball, I don't think I had anything different than you did in regards to what I was looking at. I think the Orioles are a team that are going up against the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians have been consistent just all year long. And how do they match up against this young Orioles team? Can they stay the course? Can they win the series? If they win the series, high likelihood the Yankees are top of the AL East
Hmm.
this weekend. And if not, does that give the Twins a chance? So that to me is a very interesting series to pay attention to. And then the other one again includes the team in the National League East against the tied for first American League West Seattle Mariners and the Philadelphia Phillies, which I think will be a big test for the Mariners with their new pieces because, like you said, Turner should play this week, but definitely this weekend. And it'll be very interesting to see how they match up. The only thing that stinks is Rodriguez is on the 10-day IL because that would
Hmm.
be a better test. But it'll be interesting to see what they do. So all four of these matchups have standings implications and wild card implications given where the Mariners are tied. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens, but I will not be shocked if we get together Monday as long as I can and the Yankees are top of the East.
Yeah.
Much as I hate to admit it, unless something else changes, they're another team that I Montas going to the Orioles wouldn't have been horrible. I'll be interested to see if they do anything else or if they stand pat, which we've talked about. They've got so many places that are clogged with prospects that it would have made sense for them to make a play. And who knows, maybe they still do. So, a
I
lot of
think they
good
get
baseball coming up this week. What was that?
I think they get Snell.
Wow. Which Snell? You getting Cy Young Snell? Or are you getting Tampa Bay Rays off year and this current year with the Giants Snell?
I think he figures
That
it out. I think that's the thing you're getting. I think he's gonna be a figured out, especially behind Corbin Burns and working with him.
well, he's got. Here's the other thing too that he's got that 2-year deal, like all of the friggin' free agents of Boris.
Yep.
So it's a club option. So no harm, no foul there, really. Um, so that would make some sense. It would be very interesting. Let him figure it out. You're already gonna probably, unless something drastic happens, make the playoffs and then bring him in. Let him pitch in September. Go from there.
Josh Chisholm hit his second home run.
Mother. I love that guy. I don't really
My
care for
Marlins,
him
my
right now.
Marlins shirt's useless now.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, but hey,
Yankees
great
won
week.
14-4.
Dang. And Stanton just got reinstated, didn't he?
Yeah, and Wheeler's pitched for the Phillies.
Mm,
Five
not
innings,
a good.
7 runs, 7 hits, 6 Ks, 3 walks.
That lineup is very dangerous.
Mhm.
Again, reminds me very much so of the '90s, where there's really no gaps.
Stanton 0 for 4.
Good for him. Good for him. Welcome back. So another great week. Again, trying to keep this between the 45-minute hour mark. Yes, sir. Another trade.
No, it's the return.
Okay.
Joey Weimer
Yeah, center fielder.
and Jakob Janis.
Woof. Um. Okay. That. Okay. I will have to dive into that, and I'll probably do a recap of that tomorrow. I mean, I was high on Giannis, but he hasn't done anything this year, and Weimer is a guy that just hasn't been able to hit. So, okay, interesting. Good move for the Brewers, in my mind. You
I
got
think the Reds.
Churio.
Everything I see is saying the Reds just fleeced the Brewers.
Huh. Yeah. Well, I'll have to dive into that. I don't. First gut reaction, I don't agree. But at the same time, Frankie Montas, they're not going anywhere. He's on a 2-year
No,
deal. They've got all these young pitching prospects coming up. So, hey, great week. Uh, really, again, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next 19 hours or so. But um, just stay tuned, like, subscribe, ask us any questions, interact with us on social, through the YouTube, anywhere you can listen to us. Hopefully, we'll be back next week as long as everything works out with my travel plans for vacation. We can do a quick, 45-minute recap of everything that happened with the trade deadline, where it puts people, and hit on the prospects and big matchups. So for me, looking forward to this week, looking really forward to tomorrow, and then looking forward to see how everything shakes out. Not so much during the week. I'm interested in those two series, but the weekend when everyone's got their full array of assets in front of them. So, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
nope, I'm good.
All right, perfect. Thanks again for everything tonight. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and like and subscribe. We appreciate it. Have a
Thanks
good night.
everyone. Thanks everyone. Have a good week.